Okay, so David Hammond, who is also part of the Nautical Institute, has kindly offered to give us a talk. We were going to wait a few minutes for other people to come in. Dave, maybe you want to introduce yourself a little bit as well while we wait for people to jump in.
Of course. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for your valuable time this afternoon, and thank you very much for the invitation, both from Malta in general, but also wider with the Nautical Institute. As Geraldine says, I am part of the Nautical Institute as an associate fellow, mainly focusing on human rights at sea, the organisation which I founded in 2013. So very much looking forward to giving you around about 30 minutes download. The most important part actually of what I'm going to show and discuss is actually a film. It's a 6-minute film around seafarer criminalisation, which I hope we can also discuss, or you could take away and show within your networks. So thank you very much.
Okay. All right. If anyone wants to say hello before we start. It would be nice to see. We have people, I think we have people from the Italian branch and Egypt. Okay. Right. David and Emanuele, could I remind you, and let me remind everyone that we will be, I think Emanuele has to do it, recording the lecture part, not the questions part, if there are questions after. And we will be using it, but obviously it's, you know, we're not going to be recording the interactions afterwards. It is so that we will be able to, you know, sort of broadcast what we're doing, even with the rest of the Nautical Institute. So Emanuele, can you see that it's being recorded, please? Okay. David, would you like to start?
Of course. So again, thank you for the kind opportunity. I'm not going to kill people with death by PowerPoint, but I really want to highlight some key issues around human rights at sea itself. If the technology works, which we hope it does, then we will share these slides as well. And what I would do is PDF them at the end and then send them in through Emmanuel to be distributed if you so want them. So in terms of human rights at sea, I'm going to talk about it from a civil society perspective. I'm a non-practicing counsel. I had nearly 22 years in the military, conducting counter-piracy work, and as the senior naval lawyer to our Chief of Joint Operations in the United Kingdom. That's the CEO effectively of global operations. And during that time, we saw a lot of changes at sea, particularly from a military perspective, from the piracy side and the development of interdictions at sea. I left that and retired early in 2012 and then worked for our UK, the United Kingdom, now Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office in various places around the world. And during that time, developed and the concept of human rights at sea. If I just frame it, and those people who have heard me speak over the years, if I frame it as such, in 2013, if you had typed the words human rights at sea in most of the global search engines, there was very little there at all. And there certainly wasn't a dedicated civil society platform, which was objective and looked at research and advocacy. And that's where we are today. We do have a very deliberate logo. The logo is as it is of the 3 waves, and from left to right starts in the littoral from the low water mark out into the deep water oceans with a red tip signifying that abuse can occur at either end of that scope from the low water mark out into the deep blue ocean. So if anybody's wondering about the logo, and that is a new logo as we've developed the organisation. But our founding principle is that human rights apply at sea as they do on land. For us, that's really core. Now, academically, my friends and academic colleagues may well argue that that is not strictly true because not every human right applies at sea. But as a founding principle and a basis for all of the last, well, now 12 years work, that's our starting point. We're a community interest company now. We were a charity under the UK law, UK charity law, but we found it unsustainable in terms of funding. We switched the model to a non-profit, fully transparent community interest company, which under the UK law allows us to use all of our profit into philanthropic examples of help to those people who don't have voice and agency. I'll come on to that later. Our patron is Lord Robin Teverson, who's in our UK upper house, the House of Lords. He's a Liberal Democrat and a crossbench peer. And we have been a UN Global Compact member since 2015, observer to the Western and Central Fisheries, Pacific Fisheries Commission since 2019. We have UN ECOSOC, UN Social Council accreditation since 2022. And as I say, we're 12 years into a research and investigation and advocacy, including resources hub. We're also an originator of the soft law approach to human rights at sea, known as the Geneva Declaration on Human Rights at Sea. And the concept, the narrative, and indeed our organisation was subject to the UK House of Lords inquiry into UNCLOS being fit for the 21st century in 2023-24, and where references to human rights at sea for the UK government appeared over 60 times. So when we came effectively onto the scene, I say onto the scene because we looked at everybody who was doing the work out there for welfare, for policy, for legal development around human rights protections at sea. It was very clear that there were a lot of gaps. And I put a phrase up there that somebody said to me recently, that human rights at sea is needed but not wanted. So we find that a lot of people need to hear what we want to say or what we do say objectively and is legally reviewed, but it's not necessarily wanted in terms of being heard, which puts us into an interesting position as we navigate between state actors, non-state actors, civil society, academia, and the legal professions, as well as insurance. I think we're all familiar, and I'll canter through this in terms of the context overview, but we estimate, and I say we, Human Rights Sea estimates, and it is an estimate because nobody actually knows, that 30 million people are living, working and transiting at sea every single day. Now that's the size, as you're aware, of a small to medium-sized state, and taking our founding principle that human rights apply at sea as they do on land, then we would say that the rights and protections we enjoy wherever we're sat on this call remotely, wherever we are in the world, should and must be enjoyed and protected for those people at sea. We're all aware that the 2020 global pandemic really shone a spotlight and a focus when the UN Secretary General spoke about the humanitarian crisis. And that really brought human rights at sea as a concept, not the organisation, but as a concept to the forefront. There's various statistics which we've taken from standing bodies, be it the UN, be it the IMO, or credible academic institutions. 45% of women working at sea report sexual harassment. It's been estimated by Pew Trust that over 100,000 fishermen's deaths occur per annum. 11% of all seafarer deaths were from suicide, and this was from the report from GARD that you may or may not have been aware of recently, surpassing, as they say, the number of deaths by injuries on board. We have, in our own small way, and we are a small cog in the bigger picture, influenced and affected law and policy development over the last 12 years in 52 countries that we can count. We've issued over 150 reports, publications, and they are all on the website. They're in our resources page, and our search bar is always being optimized, but you can pretty much type in most queries into our search system and find what you need. One of our proudest bits of work was very much in terms of taking law policy, bringing it to a coastal state, in this case New Zealand, and enabling and helping the system change 9 words in the primary legislation of their Maritime Transport Act. And by doing that and highlighting the fact that at the time New Zealand wasn't fulfilling its duties under the Maritime Labour Convention, What we now see is a maritime levy process that's publicly funded or sourced by public funds in New Zealand that has a direct impact per annum on 130,000 seafarers in terms of providing sustainable onshore welfare facilities across the 11 ports. Now, that is a proud moment for us, but it is just an example of a requirement for collaboration from state authorities, non-state actors, unions, civil society for the benefit of seafarers. But as you're probably guessing, we're not just looking at seafarers. We've recently been away in the Philippines, Ukraine, and in the UK and Northern Ireland dealing with fisheries matters. And we have ongoing investigations at the moment in the Pacific region, which our film Death at Sea is coming out on Human Rights Day on the 10th of December, which is a long-standing investigation into the mysterious death of a fisheries observer in the Pacific basin around Papua New Guinea. In terms of context from a state level, we also get involved with briefing states, our own state here in the United Kingdom, but I'm sure everybody on this call is very familiar with the concerns that run through all of the coastal states that we're aware of, from IUU to piracy, the issue of terrorist attacks, modern slavery, human trafficking, and of course, refugee and maritime interdiction. There's a but there, and I deliberately put it in red because the reality for us as an organisation is that we deal with, and we're not funded to deal with this, but we do deal when we can, the families and the dependents who are left behind, be it seafarer abandonment, or it is a case of imprisonment in a foreign state, which I will come on to. And I would say that this is the hidden endemic of seafarer abuse, because we hear about the seafarers, but we rarely, if ever, hear about the ripple effect into the immediate family and extended families, and the impacts that incarceration and abandonment has on those seafarers and their families. In terms of the scope of abuse at sea, again, we've touched on human trafficking, slavery. We cover issues around homicide. Obviously, if it is a criminal act and we have information, we'll work with the authorities, with Interpol, and we will pass on and disclose with all of the usual security data protection caveats to enable those investigations to continue. Bullying, harassment, exploitation has been a key development in the Maritime Labour Convention, which is great to see. I say it's great to see, but we're in 2025, and it's only been in the last years that the mechanisms that are rightly put in place for the likes of the development of the Maritime Labour Convention are actually really focusing on the hard issues that organisations like ourselves have been banging the drum for over a decade on. Sexual exploitation is a key issue that comes across our desks as well. We're all also familiar with the failure or a politicisation of rescue at sea. And of course, most recently, the attack on commercial vessels during times of conflict, both national conflict, but also international armed conflict, as we see in the Black Sea. And a very interesting discussion to be had separate to this briefing in terms of the validity of a state using all necessary proportionate means to defend themselves, including preventing supply of war materials. So as you can probably see, the scope of what human rights at sea as a narrative, but also as an organisation, and a small organisation covers, is extensive. I've been asked on a number of occasions why there is a need for human rights at sea. Why is there a need for civil society input and indeed, I suppose, influence to the wider maritime governance, ocean governance, and maritime industry narrative, and what do we bring to the party? Well, I would simply say that you need civil society, because often we are in receipt of information as quick as, or even quicker than, might come into employers, might come into owners, might come into insurers. And we do work collaboratively with those organisations, as well as other civil society organisations, to bring objective fact, and in this is the modern society where we question what truth is. We aim and always aim to be entirely objective, and undertake our investigations with a corroborated evidence that is able to be disclosed to the necessary judicial authorities, or indeed constabulary authorities. We aim and always aim to be transparent, objective and accountable in our work. We are working also against a background of one of the biggest impediments of serious organised crime groups. Those serious organised crime groups are embedded everywhere, and they are highly sophisticated and arguably an example of the evolution and Darwinian evolution of business within hours, days, as opposed to weeks, months, years at state level. And that is a basis for a lot of the abuses that are brought to us within the maritime space. There's a general continuing lack of awareness of what human rights at sea means, what abuses are occurring at sea, and we continue this ongoing advocacy effort to bring that to the forefront. Again, the organised crime part of ship, if I was to use that vernacular, is really, as we know, behind the increasing growing levels of mixed migration at sea. Now, the reality is that there's various figures in terms of global population, but I think we should be on safe ground by saying as of today, we're looking at about 8.3 billion people and growing rapidly. We've got finite resources. We're going to have consistent movement of people by land, by sea, and that issue is just going to grow and grow. And you can see, as we see in Europe, the conflict that brings against in terms of challenging national positions, identities, and borders. We also look at impunity when there's unlawful actions from flag states, coastal states, beneficial owners, the recruiters, and the managers of crew. And the hardest thing we have to do is triage and say no. Again, when you look at the scope of the issues that come across our desks, we are simply not resourced to be able to deal with that. So we hand it off to the appropriate people and our collaborative partners as often as we can. But I want to, at this point, just draw out and away from our organisation and really put this on the table, that it is arguable that the effective enforcement mechanisms that we believe in and occur at sea, particularly under the likes of UNCLOS, aren't actually effective. The reality is that without enforcement, we don't have deterrent effect. And I do not see, and this is a both personal and professional opinion at this stage, I do not see this getting any better. In fact, if we look at all of the signals, warnings and indicators, particularly in the European landmass, we are heading towards significant conflict with at least one other state. That is quite a frightening prospect. And as I was speaking earlier this week and last week with fellow colleagues and some people we mentor, the reality is that when conflict comes along, human rights are effectively put to one side, whatever we would like to think. And you can see that anywhere in the world in terms of global conflict today. So when I draw that back to ocean governance, we've got to question what is left. We can state what the black letter law is, we can state what international convention says, but if it can't be enforced, then arguably it's impotent. I wrote an article for Lloyd's List where I said that seafarers were disposable in shipping. And I wrote it with a view over a decade of with many other people trying to better working environment, safety environment, not just for seafarers, fishermen, but their families as well. And today, as I speak to you, I can only deduce, particularly now after the last 12 years, that seafarers are disposable assets. And when I say disposable assets, I mean that they are disposable because they are easily replaced. because there is always somebody who's going to need a job. They're assets because they're necessary for business and the shipping industry, and indeed the related supply and value chains. And that is not something that people want to hear, which goes back to one of the first things I said about our work being needed, but not necessarily wanted. I would love to open up conversations with people if you agree, disagree as to this position, but we can only state this based on over a decade now of often very tough cases, tough advocacy, where we persistently get knocked back or we don't get the wins for those seafarers and families. So again, that would be maybe something for the Nautical Institute to take forward as well. Criminalisation. I would like to think that everybody on the call and subsequently people who look at this recording and listen to this recording will be aware of Ali Al-Bakari's case with the Phoenician M. Out of the crew, Ali is still the only crew member still in prison with a 30-year sentence. Everybody else has been acquitted. The captain, who's Croatian, disappeared from the prison and appeared back at home. But what has happened is that a seafarer has been left behind, we would say, without the correct due process, and we are engaged with the necessary people at the right levels. And indeed, we have been assisting Elena, his wife. Ultimately, it goes back to one of the red texts that I highlighted about the endemic issues around about abandonment of families. And Elena has fought and continues to fight today, and those who have maybe seen her posts on LinkedIn and media coverage is fighting invariably on her own. With that, what I wanted to do, and we're hoping that the technology will work, is show you the short film of her testimony to us. And we believe it's impactful. We would like this spread far and wide so that people can see the impact on a family member. And this isn't just for Elena, but it's for all the families who are affected in a similar situation. If for any reason you can't hear this, please could you just flag up, because I can't see you, but I can hear you. So I'll play this now.
We have been married for almost 4 years. He's such a clever man, speaking lots of languages, a handsome man. So I fell in love immediately. My husband was at sea for about 6 months, and it was the end of my husband's contract. So I was waiting for him at home. And suddenly at night, I got a message that we are arrested. They are taking my phone. He just disappeared. I lost my best friend. I lost my husband. I lost everything. And now it's absolute silence in our house. Where is my husband? What happened? Why don't they tell me anything? What happened? Where is he? My name is Yelena Al-Bukhari, and today I'm here in London because I'm trying to save my husband. My husband was at sea for about 6 months. When he was in Colombia, rocks were found on the vessel. At that time, we didn't pay too much attention to that accident because the crew spent only 2 days in Colombia, and when they came to Turkey, unfortunately, the Turkish police said that again they found the drugs. So my husband and 10 crew members were arrested. The day when he was arrested, it was my birthday, and it was the end of my husband's contract. So I was waiting for him at home, and since that day, I didn't know where my husband was. He just disappeared. I contacted the company, and I contacted the embassy of Finland in Turkey, the Finnish police, everyone, and nobody could say anything. I found my husband absolutely by chance. I was asking some seafarers in different chats on different social media, but it took me about 2 weeks. So for 2 weeks, I was really going crazy. And then, unfortunately, in September last year, 2024, he and the captain, they were sentenced to 30 years. Of course, it was the worst day of my life, so I can say that now I have two worst days: when my husband was arrested, and the second day when we got news about the sentence. I still remember that day. I was sitting at home waiting for some news, and nobody answered me. Very late at night, I got the message from the Finnish embassy: Elena, we are very sorry, your husband is sentenced to 30 years. The other crew members are released. That day, my life changed absolutely. Something like broke inside of me, and I understood that now I'm absolutely alone. I have to fight absolutely alone for my husband. Nobody will help me. Unfortunately, the seafarers' criminalization is a big problem now, and lots of seafarers are suffering. What I can say from my experience: always ask your husbands and your sons and brothers all the information about the company, about the crewing agency. When my husband disappeared, I didn't have any information, and I lost lots of time trying to find out the information, what company he was working for, and so on. And secondly, don't be afraid to speak about that problem, because you're not alone. And please don't lose hope. That's the only thing which helps me and helps my husband. Now I'm in contact with the crew members who were arrested with my husband, and they say that the things are not that good. When you are in prison for a few years, then you lose everything. When my husband comes back home, how he will feel after being in prison for 2 years, how he will get back to normal life. It's my first time here in London, and I'm really surprised how people whom I don't know, they support me, and they are trying to help. I have never thought that I would get such support from people all around the world. A few days ago, I had a meeting with ITF, and I'm very thankful to them. They gave me lots of hope. They showed me that they are working and they are here with me. I hope that Turkish authorities will understand our problem. They will see how much suffering our family has now and what we are going through. So what about Finnish authorities? I really appreciate their help, but I would like to see more support to the family. I'm not Finnish originally, but my husband is a Finnish citizen. Every time he calls me, he asks me, what about Finland? What are they doing? Are they trying to help me? Because Finland is his only hope. I believe that soon this nightmare will end. Every time I come and visit him, I see that he's changing. He's becoming older, and now his beard is absolutely gray. And I see absolutely different person. I see that he's broken, unfortunately. The person I met 4 years ago and the person I see now, they are just like two different people. My husband called me and he was absolutely desperate. He lost his hope and he told me, please go back home. Don't wait for me. I'm sentenced to 30 years. You will never see me again. And I told him, no, you're my husband. I'm always with you. I promised you when we were getting married. And since that day, I'm fighting for him. And as I have promised, the day of our wedding, I'm always with him and I will always support him, no matter what.
So a hard-hitting but deliberately so film of advocacy, which alongside other organisations we obviously take very seriously in how we distribute that. We obviously do it with informed consent and permissions and all the necessary safeguards. But without these kind of films, it is not personal. People do not understand the suffering that's going on. At the moment in Iran, we have 4 ongoing cases where seafarers are effectively lost in a judicial system. In one case, the owners abandoned the crew. That owner continues to make money and trades. The crew have a real lack of representation and they have limited national support. And in red, I've just made it very clear here that we are dealing with lives that have changed forever. Some of these seafarers are effectively pawns in political negotiation assets, and there is an impotence, I would say, to intercede as well. Against that background, we must also respect the national jurisdiction and the due process within countries. But the criminalisation issue, alongside the abandonment issue, certainly for seafarers, is something that should not be happening at the level that it is today in 2025. We have on our website that article, and I just lifted these lines, and it's a personal testimony from the family. For those of you who maybe aren't able to read it, I will read it for you. The ship owner has completely abandoned them, stopped paying their salary since December 2023, and refuses to provide any financial or legal support. They have learned that he, the ship owner, even collected the crew's insurance money and purchased a new vessel, leaving them behind to face this ordeal alone. Now, without the advocacy of organisations like ourselves and other persons and in entities in the welfare sector and civil society, arguably you would not know about this. So again, our work is needed, but it's not necessarily wanted. On a more positive note, I highlighted at the start of of speaking with you the Geneva Declaration on Human Rights at Sea as a fledgling soft law document. This document is now translated into 14 languages. It's based on 4 fundamental principles, but it does not require any state, flag state, coastal state, or port state authority to adopt any other measure in taking this on board or implementing it, because what it is a collation and culmination of established national and international law based around these 4 fundamental principles. And they are that human rights are universal, they apply at sea as they do on land. All persons at sea, without any distinction, are entitled to their human rights. There are no maritime specific reasons for denying human rights at sea, and all human rights established under both treaty and customary international law must be respected at sea. You'll note that we don't use the word should, because if we believe in the principle that human rights apply at sea as they do on land, if we believe in the rule of law and we believe in that apportionment of fundamental rights that are indivisible and inherent, then there can't be a should in those sentences. There must be a must. It has its own website, free to download. Again, we give everything away so that you can go to source and take what you need. We are obviously an civil society advocacy platform. If you were to take nothing away from today but one web link, I would suggest it's the bottom one of the humanrightsatsea.org/news. And there in literally 20 seconds, you can see what we have been doing, what we're reporting on, but also the scope of the issues in the places we're at and we're influencing, often discreetly behind the scenes. We do have professional services, and the reason I raise this is in terms of our structure, we did close as a charity because we could not support everything that was being asked of us with the incomes that we were desperately begging for. And I use the word begging correctly. So after a decade, we closed the charitable structure and we've moved to a non-profit. And what we do is we provide state, non-state entities, we support legal legal firms and insurers to do the digging and to do some of the lifting on casework, particularly for fishermen and seafarers, migrants, refugees. And then we invest all of that money back into human rights at sea, so we can produce films like Elena's testimony, because those kind of films are essential for ongoing advocacy. So it's a circular economy, and that's how we do business, in case anybody wants to know. And there are an entire suite of support and social projects we have been working on as well through that platform. So I have just lost you, and I'm just going to go back to the final screen. Let me put that back up. If I have, I think I've lost you there. It was all going so well. So that is me. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. If there are any questions or you need to get in contact with me, the organisation directly, contact details are there. Thank you very much indeed.